Okay. Library card registration?
Library cards. And I think we'll have extensive discussion on this issue. Maybe any Brett. I bring this up because of discussions with my own staff on what people need in order to get a library card. Okay, they don't need an ID, they do need an ID, they need a home address, they don't have a home address. You were sent the Minnesota reciprocal borrowing contract and also a piece of statute about protection of library property. And some of us are very, very interested in protecting what we have, and others of us are interested in put it out there, okay? So I'm asking you what you think. It is an issue more especially nowadays when some of us are doing negotiations for online resources. And in Owatonna, we usually make that negotiation for the whole county. So we are negotiating for all of Steele County to use this resource. However, when we have 10,000 items borrowed in a year from Dodge County libraries, and we have 5,000 plus items borrowed annually from Waseca libraries, we know that there are others besides Steele County who are using our resources and are probably getting library cards from us. Because what should I say? You go back to your home library and get your library card, even though you work here in Owatonna. Okay, so those are some of the issues, and I did call our state librarian and ask her because I'm too lazy to do the research myself. I knew she would be sitting at her desk at 4:30 on a Friday. Is there any interest in this issue? Is this something you talk about?
I know what you mean, and I know that libraries do it differently. We just went through it, and we have a lot of people who come through and live in Austin for a while, or maybe they might live 3 months up in Minneapolis and then 9 months down by us. And so for our purposes right now, right or wrong, we'll give you a library card if you tell us who you are and where, if you can show us who you are and where you live. And if you live in Minnesota and you want one of our library cards, we will give you one.
Are you talking about print materials, or are you targeting electronic materials as being a whole new ballgame because of the specific contracts that are required?
It's a single contract.
Yep.
If I say I'm making this contract for the residents of Steele County, then I have to follow the terms of the contract.
That was one of the problems with Overdrive. When Hennepin first negotiated with Overdrive, they just basically said we're going to offer it to everybody. And eventually later Overdrive came back and said, no, your contract, just because you're Hennepin and you are the biggest county in the state, you cannot offer Overdrive access to somebody in Pelican Rapids.
Right. When we started the downloadable music, we had people driving from the cities who wanted an Owatonna library card.
Yeah, there's a tension there. Because these are books or music, there, of course, a lot of us think that that's how they should be treated. But the model is much more like an online database. And so there's a tension, and that's handled differently with the reciprocal borrowing compact.
Well, that's what I was going to say. That's kind of a weird, because they come to Owatonna, they say, well, I want a library card, I live in the state of Minnesota, where we have to give them a card. We can't say no. And then they've got your number, your prefix. They can then go and use the electronic. Has there been any discussion about this with, is that the CRIPSLA?
The premise on CRIPSLA is that a person gets their library card where they're paying the property taxes, whether that's in the city or the county, but it's because that's where the primary source of library funding is. So that's the stand we take, especially with regards to reciprocal borrowing, or
in that borrower's compact works, because when the person comes into the Owatonna Public Library and you accept the card from Bemidji and they don't bring back 10 of your books, you can ask for reimbursement, and I will bill Gitchigami Regional Library for the people that they have in their region that's made off with your for them. So that the reciprocal borrowing works, compact works, because the regions say there's no way to check whether or not the person from Bemidji is a good or bad risk, therefore we will make good on it.
Right, and I totally, that's great, I totally agree with it and all that, but then when we have these Friegel, Zinio, whatever, we can't, we're not allowed by those contracts to. And then that's what we said with, if the library has,
if your contract is for certain privileges, it goes by what you've negotiated. So the people in Northfield who have a Northfield card don't get to use the Dakota County overdrive collection, and if you live in Hampton, you don't get to use the Northfield or the Cannon Falls overdrive. It really is by residency and where people are paying their taxes.
So, Ann, correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding has always been that because of that, those kinds of transactions are not addressed in the reciprocal borrowing agreement because they're treated like online resources. So theoretically, we should probably be doing something with those cards. You know, someone's come down from Gitchigami and you give them the card.
You're not supposed to give them a card. Okay. You're supposed to enter their borrower code in our system.
That's true. That's true.
So that the prefixes still are used. So that, and we,
do you do that?
But what will happen for us is that someone will come and they will say, they'll have their pieces mail, maybe they're supposed to, or we'll have mailed something to them later, but they'll have, you know, I live on 307 4th Street now, but they've got their, well, which address are we most likely to really get mail to you? Oh, my mom's house up in Minneapolis, or they're here, they're there, they're very, very transient.
Right. So yeah, Ann's making a point there, and I'd forgotten that. Yes, we're not supposed to be issuing them cards. We're supposed to take their existing card number. That's the whole point of the unique number structure.
Well, I think it's starting something different then, because I'm seeing more and more transient people too. And, well, I work here. You know, I work here. I want my library. The expectation is that this is their library, you know, and not Waseca, and they're not home to go to the Waseca library, and I want a card here because I come every day in my lunch hour.
And I think that's a key point, is they're not able to always go to that library building and do whatever it is they have to do. And I think there's other reasons that's problematic as well. People have gotten used to the idea that, well, I go online, I register my account, I'm good to go, I start using things. And that the book lending model isn't even part of that thinking anymore. They're just wanting the e-resources.
The borrower's compact goes back to pre-1991. I don't remember the year. I just remember the first time I dealt with it was when we were still in the EST building, so it had to be before 1991. And really, we really were looking at it from a book point of view. You walked into the library from someplace else and you got a book. And that actually was a recent discussion with regards to the situation in Washington County when Lake Elmo left Washington County library system. Was that, okay, there were people in Lake Elmo who had still wanted to use the services of the Washington County Library. So upon selling them a library card so that they were paying the equivalent of the tax dollars that they would have paid when they were previously paying Washington County taxes. The question came up then at that point, what services do they get? And the idea and the decision by the state library was if you were selling them a Washington library card, because they are in an untaxed area of Minnesota, then they get the rights and privileges of Washington County, but they do not get to use their now purchased Washington county library card in St. Paul. You know, they can use it for books, but they don't get to get at the licensed database. So it actually is a bigger issue. It's great you're thinking of it. It is a much bigger issue than this committee or our region because it has implications every place where we cross a county line, or even if it's within a region, like Washington County versus Ramsey County side by side, and in the same region, but they have different services.
I've got a question, but Ann was first.
The other thing that we've done, because I totally get it, the other thing that we've done is that we've no longer renew people for 3 years. They're only good for a year, and we only renew them in person. If they call with some sort of a problem, we'll extend that due date for a couple of days so they can download their ebook or something. But then we'll say we require you to come in because we have so many people who leave. We've had it where they leave, they're in Florida, and they're still using our ebooks for a couple of years, and they, you know, it's not right. So and people leaving and not telling us. So that's kind of how we make ourselves feel like, well, we're catching most of the problem.
So at one point, there was a discussion among staff that, and for a very different reason, was that we were thinking about kids getting cards at various literary events like the Red Wing. Should we facilitate the receiving of that card by registering people and then making sure that you get the respective registration forms, but then we needed a local registration form. And I said, well, you know, Nelson's got this handy registration form that's used in all 103 branches, regardless if it's Hennepin or Washington. So would it help if there was a standard registration form? Because I never then did anything. And the discussion at one point was, if 103 libraries, 56% of the state's population are already using the same registration form, regardless of the location, could this happen, could registration format happen on a statewide level? And Chrisette sort of went nowhere with the state library. So it might, but I don't know that that will solve anything other than it would be a different looking form.
I got a stupid question. What about Austin, Lee, and the people from Iowa that drive up? How does that work with other states?
If Iowa drives up and they own no property, no parcel of property in Minnesota, then they are supposed to be charged for a non-residency. The same thing if you come across the river in Winona or La Crescent or Red Wing. They are supposed to be charged for a non-residency. We do that.
And you do that? Oh.
And the non-residency stays with the library that's providing the service, hence the Lake Elmo, Washington County situation.
It's probably less than 5. And of all of the people that decide to not do that, who are really angry that they're not using our library and feel that they ought to be able to do that, they don't get it. They're really angry. It's a real point of tension. That we work here, we buy gas here, I pay my groceries here, I'm shopping here all the time, you know.
And my answer to that is that the law says they have to pay property taxes. So SELCO membership requirement says that you're going to follow state law. So
what law actually says property taxes?
I was just going to say, a lot of people don't pay property tax.
If they're sleeping here, they are because they're landlord tax.
Oh, the landlord does.
Sleeping in the back lot of Walmart.
Yeah, they're not paying anything. Well, Walmart is. Walmart's paying. Yeah.
Does it actually say property taxes in the?
I don't know.
In the statute, I don't remember what it is, but.
No. But we're funded by property tax.
You don't have it memorized word for word.
moving along. Sometimes I'm 100% right on, and sometimes I'm like, holy Moses, how long has it been this way? You look at the footnotes in the law and you go, oh, 1981.
That's much closer than Mary Kay to the cities where people are dropping in thinking that maybe that's going to
people drive back and forth to cities all the time.
I don't have an ID. Okay? Yeah. So I'm staying you're staying there, fine, write it down. Okay? That's all I need.
You got the I-35 corridors, 45 minutes. There's probably 10% of the population that works in the metro area.
We made a new status that I love called restricted borrower, which lets you take two things, and it solves a lot of problems for us. So it doesn't work on the e-books because it's not, we haven't taught any of the databases to accept that borrowing. So it's just physical things, and we also set it so that on any Austin items that it's fine free. So then it works for kids who just really, they just need that, or homeless people, or people without their ID, or people that maybe we've waived a bunch of fines for, and they'll say, now you're going to be restricted borrowers for 6 months, or whatever it is. It's the best thing that idea I've had in 3 So, yeah, that's a handy tool.
When I was looking at the documents, that reciprocal borrowing agreement, that was from 2001, I believe. Similar to when we were talking about the automation services contract, in almost 14 years now, we've changed so much, especially in terms of electronic delivery. Isn't it time that this agreement was reviewed? I mean,
we could certainly request that of the state library, but it was a state library initiative initially. So, different person though. New person. She's got some interest. She's got some interest in bringing access up to, up to law. I mean, there are things that they're looking at that actually are saying, the law says this, and we've been doing that. So we've got simpler forms through the Regional Library Basic Systems Board, because they went through and they said, we're asking for this, we're asking for this, they're asking for this, where we're tying your money to getting this data, and there's nothing in statute that says we have the right to ask for that in relationship to the dollar. So the form got simpler. It was really nice. But I can certainly suggest to Jen Nelson that we take a look at that it's time, because it has been. It was 2001, and like I said, before that it was 1980 something, 1990, because we dealt with it before we moved to the frontage road building. So that's been a long time.
Mary Kay, are you getting what you needed out of this discussion? Do you want specific answers?
Yeah.
And just to answer some of your questions, we require a driver's license. If they don't have it, state ID. If they don't have that, then we limited them to 2 items. Similar to what they do. Yes, and it follows the 222 tune.
Easy to remember.
And then we have a standard form that everyone fills out.
I just don't think we need to ask for more identification than you're required to get for voting. Okay? Yeah, and that's my baseline that I look at. Yeah. Why are we asking for this? Yeah. I mean, I might ask for it, but for what?
I mean, the issue for, I think, medium and smaller libraries, we don't, we say, oh, yeah, Fred's brother, they're fine, but we also don't, most of us don't do any Zinio or Frigo, so those are non-issues for us, but that doesn't mean that they won't be, because then it's getting closer, at least for us as well. So.
It also feels, when you're dealing with police department or county deputies, and you have a patron who they need to go and speak to get your things back, they need addresses and things like that. We don't have it happen very often, but once in a while if we send out 3 or 4 letters and the individual, we know they're in town because the letter's not coming back to us, we will just talk to the deputy and see if he might just stop by and remind them that they need to return their things.
That wouldn't happen in Steele County.
But this is in a small town. I mean,
Yeah.
but we're dealing with a lot of transient people, and that is getting to be a real big problem. And they tell us they have no address. Well, then how do we contact you? You don't have an address or you don't have a phone number. One woman said she had no address, and so we went over to the post office and said, is that possible that you just don't have an address? And he said, highly unlikely. So when we asked her again, it turned out that her things go to her mother's house.
Well, good discussion. Did you have a comment?
No, just, is there any interest in seeing the form that Nelsa uses, or does it?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll put a PDF out there.
You know, and
No, we call it English.
just thinking about when we have these discussions, you know, part of the strategic plan is being more engaged with the organization and doing some of these things. I always wonder if these kinds of conversations shouldn't be a springboard for something else, that we could come together as librarians and talk about professional issues that we're facing in maybe an informal manner or some way where we can look at it. Because we're all dealing with this. How do we do our forms? What's happening? What are you doing? What are you doing? Because I don't hear this unless this comes up. But it's issues that we face.
Well, this might be also a discussion, not so that we're bad and have to sit through it, but maybe this needs to be a discussion at the Public Library Directors meeting, because that affects not just you that are here, but it affects 37 locations. Look at this huge thing of putting restrictions on, it's your stuff. This stuff is yours. You paid for it. I'm stopping you and restricting you too when you paid for it. Somehow I'm able to think that you paid for it. The takeaway from today, though, I will mention to Jen Nelson that it has been 13 years since we've looked at the reciprocal borrowing compact, and she is doing a review of procedures and practices and looking at all the laws, that maybe that should move. If it's not on her list, she needs to add it and maybe move it up the list.
One quick thing, just thinking about all this, when I was looking over some of the stuff and thinking about the issues, in terms of actual ILS operations, you know, the SELCO key cards have their own designated prefix. Do you know what I'm talking about? The small ones that get handed out?
Oh, they have the SELCO prefix.
Okay,
100,
well,
100.
yeah. So when people use those cards for e-services, are those authenticated with whatever? Do you understand what I'm asking? Because if you go to Overdrive,
I guess I didn't realize.
if you have a key card and you were, I don't know what databases are authenticated against that, but let's say not everyone had been on Overdrive.
The new ones that don't have barcodes,
Those keychain ones.
no,
This one's a Winona one, though.
that's a Winona one. That's not like the ones I was getting out at Pine Island all had SELCO cards that I got. That's what my barcode number is. We will check on that. You know the question? I know what he's asking, but the answer is
Which is why
have their.
we actually try not to give those out because I wanted to buy them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So what the little sidebar conversation we're having over here, this is the first I've heard that those cards don't have the individual library prefixes. And so if that's the case, then yeah, James is making a good point. So we will check on that and report back to the group and go from there.
Okay. Well, we're almost out of time. Do we have any announcements, good news?
We have one announcement. This is Michael's last meeting, so I want to say that. And Michael has been one of the voting members. So Donovan will continue, now that we have 2 voting members from SELCO. Donovan will continue to
one of those people, and Cheryl, as the person who manages the ILS system, will be the other vote. Do you want to know that you're going to be calling for nominations?
Oh, yeah, right. It's that time of the year, so I'm going to send out a call for nominations for the committee members whose terms are ending this year. I can look them up if you want me to, but I don't have the top of my head.
And so you'll also call for any open positions, because we do have, I think, the what was an alternate for the small library, but is now a voting member. There has been no person in that position, so we'll
Same with academic and special.
right.
Okay, great. Well, we've reached the end of our agenda, and this meeting is adjourned. I didn't think it was going to happen for a little bit.
I've got one of those little key things.